So they are a group of about 2,500 beings of light. They don't have physical form. And instead of incarnating to a planetary body the way that we do, they actually align with the blueprint of a star. And in their case, they align with Alcyone, which is the central star in the Pleiades star system. And I guess I should back it up a little for those who don't know where the Pleiades is. If you're in the northern hemisphere in the wintertime, you can see it. It's pretty visible. So if you can find Orion's belt, if you look up maybe 5-10 degrees, you'll see this hazy cluster of stars in the sky. And they tell me it's an open cluster of about 750 stars. That's kind of how they define their system. And they actually were waiting for me to channel verbally because when I first started, I was doing automatic writing and they work with tone and sound. So when you hear me channel, their dialect is different than my own, but really it's not any one particular dialect. It's just really open vowels where they can modulate the frequency a bit because in addition to getting the information, it's as if you get a healing when you listen to the channeling itself.
So you communicate with all these beings. How many are they?
So there are about 2,500 in the collective. So really, it just seems like a being to me. At the very beginning, they said you can call us Mrs. P because it was a little easier for us to kind of wrap our brains around the fact that we were talking to 2,500 beings at once. My Hawaiians call them Auntie P. So, and then as the years went by and we were able to kind of shift our consciousness, now we talk about them as the P's. So, it's really what we can handle. And their mission, if you will, their focus for their beingness is as record keepers and keepers of frequency. So the Pleiades has been a system that has kind of overseen our development. They're stewards for us. And as we are coming up in frequency, we're learning how to become stewards of our own planet. So they're teaching us how to do that. And I guess you could say that they have come down in physical form because there's an aspect of me that is actually part of the collective, which is why I work with them. I contracted before birth that this would be part of the work that I would do. I agreed to bring through their messages. So I suppose you could say they have come in physical form. It's just not the way that we think of typically as an incarnational process.
Okay, so how do they come in a physical form? Do you personally see them? What do we have to be in a specific vibrational, alignment to feel or see them? How do you explain that?
So, to access multidimensional information, you have to be in your heart. If you're in your ego programs, well, the guides say we have two operating systems. We have the operating system of the mind, which was set up to allow us to play in this dimension, and we can experience lack, limitation, and separation, which is kind of an exciting thing to the soul because it's so different than any other way that we experience reality. And then we have the operating system of the heart, which allows us access to multidimensional information. So if you want to access your guides, the Akashic records, healing energy, you have to be in the heart-centered space. So when you're in that space, you can receive the waveforms, you can perceive them. Now, how we interpret them is going to be different for everybody. Everybody has the ability to channel, everybody has access to their intuitive and psychic abilities. It's just a matter of whether we have the volume turned up. So some people will, as that frequency comes in, perceive it as light. Some people as sound. Some people will smell it or taste it. Some people will hear it. So for me, my strongest ability is first and foremost feeling, but I can also see. So sometimes, and it's pretty rare for me, but occasionally I will see them as color. They present as blue light, but that's pretty rare. That's not my strongest ability. So for me, it's more the connection that I feel and the way I experience it in my body.
Connection, how this contact started for you? How long ago? I know back like 1995, if I'm not mistaken, but how this happened to you? I mean, do you hear a voice or suddenly, like I read the books of Neil Donald Walsh, and he was depressed. You remember his books, Conversation with God, and he heard the voice of God. And he said, "Okay, start writing this down." So that was his channeling. Now, if you can explain your process, what happened?
So for me, it was a little different. I started having visions and I didn't know what they were. I thought maybe they were associated with the building that I was living in at the time. But so I started doing research on that. And along the way, I came across channeling and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know anybody who did it, but I had such a strong, deep connection to it. I knew it was something that I was supposed to be doing. So I got some books on it and I did some of those exercises in the books. And I would have very visceral responses, like my eyes would flutter in water and my body would tingle, but I couldn't get any words out. And I'd been doing work on myself at the same time. I was studying meditation and doing a lot for personal development. And then one day, as I came back to the practice, I knew I was supposed to have pen and paper. And that was probably about 9 months later, because I would try and I'd have the kind of the same results. And then I, put it down and come back again later. But I knew I was supposed to have pen and paper, and it started with automatic writing. And that's when my guides came through for the very first time.
Okay, so what do you see different from 1995 to right now, 2025? It's 30 years. What is the main difference you see? Do you feel this shift, what everybody's talking about? Do you feel it? Do you see it? And if you see it, can you explain it to my viewers? What's happening right now? Because everybody's it's like an acceleration of understanding. People are more. Back in 95, not everybody was talking yoga and meditation and stuff. Okay, it was around, but talking about the stuff we're talking right now, it was a little weird back then. Probably, I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was not
yeah,
the norm. Yeah,
yeah,
even yoga, meditation, those were not mainstream things yet.
yeah,
So, those were things that, you did in India. You didn't do them
yeah.
in the United States. And I was fortunate enough, I have a degree in theater and film. And so, that was in the late 80s. And I had access to yoga and personal development through that. So that was my inroad. So it was not something that was necessarily mainstream, but there was certainly there were some bookstores. I was in Chicago at the time, and that was kind of a little mecca for energy work. That was one place that light workers were drawn to. So there were several metaphysical bookstores there at the time, but it wasn't huge. And there were a few people who were channeling and out there publicly, but it was nothing the way that it is today. It's amazing to me today how many people say they channel and how many people do the language of light, which was something that even 15 years ago was pretty rare. So people are kind of awakening to an expanded version of themselves, a remembrance of their divine nature. So it's become way more mainstream and it doesn't seem as far out there. And to me, channeling has always been something that's really normal. It's actually not normal to be cut off and separate in that way. So it just was kind of a natural thing for me. And I didn't really have any hangups or I didn't have a lot of judgment surrounding it. I didn't have a background where those things were forbidden. My background was pretty liberal. So it's amazing today. And one of the things I love to see is that if you start talking about this kind of stuff with people, how many people have actually had experiences, but they're
Yeah,
still afraid to talk about it.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
as we get more comfortable and we start talking about it, then other people say, oh, well, yeah, I've had that experience too.
yeah, 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 yeah. Even with NDEs, I interviewed a lot of NDEs, and they used to, no, they were afraid to talk about this because you can go to, to mental institution for that.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, they didn't tell anything in the hospital, behind the hospital because they were afraid. But then they went home and they tell somebody close one. They didn't believe it. They shut down for 10 years, 20 years. And then they write a book. They say, no, I got to talk about this. So anyway, I'm talking about something else. So I was asked you about the shift. Do you feel this shift? What is happening right now? We're in 2025. And when this
So
started, yeah, go ahead.
it's an
Yeah,
increase in our overall
yeah.
frequency, which I
Okay.
know when we look out at the world today and we see everything that's kind of going on, we think, well, are we really increasing our resonance? But the guides say the higher that we go, we also see more of that darkness, what's been hidden that needs to be healed. And that's natural as a society goes through the ascension process. So really the way that they describe this as a grand experiment, Earth itself. So we have genetic material from thousands of worlds. And along with that genetic material comes all of the emotional components, all of the experiences, the genetic records of these species. It's all contained within Earth's records. So we have access to this, and we have also a wide range of emotion, which is pretty rare. Other species don't have so many emotions to kind of play with and experiment with. And what this affords us the opportunity to do is find lots of different ways to find our way out of density, because this was a game of dissension and reascension. Can we go down into 3D, forget who we are, operate under the illusion of separation, and find our way back out? And that's where we're at right now. We're learning to remember our true divine nature. So
Okay, so
I
go ahead. Sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, stupid question probably about the about soul contracts. Well, I heard this from many in the years. Not all of them, but some of them remember it. And they say that they had this soul contract, and this is a group of beings around them. There was a group of beings around them, and they say, okay, you can do it. We are with you all the time. We're going to sustain you all the time. It's going to be hard, but you want to do it, you sure? Because a soul wants to come to Earth to go through all this learning process, accelerate the learning process, something like that. So, how this happening? I mean, is this true? I mean, we make this contract to go through this hard lifestyle here?
So the guides tell me that yes, we do set up contracts. And, that's how we have astrology, astronomy, where the planets are, determines the alignment and the frequencies that we come in and we carry. And we will choose patterns. We'll choose our family because there are certain things that we want to explore. And the guides say that, yes, some beings will choose really difficult lives for several reasons. One may be because they've tried it before in other lifetimes and they just couldn't master the lesson. So they chose something that was really big and in their face so they could see it. Or it may be that they want to be of service to humanity. And so they're exploring that frequency and sharing the knowledge of exploring that frequency. And always there is the hope when somebody experiences something that is so dark and so heavy that when you've got the victim and the perpetrator, that hopefully in that moment, just before that darker, heavier experience is had, there is the option, the ability for that soul who's playing the perpetrator to choose a higher frequency. So that's also the hope. And so some souls will choose that to be of service in that way. So we can know all of source energy. People will say, well, why is there darkness at all? Well, that's part of the setup of the game. And the guides do describe this as a game. And sometimes as humans, we don't really love to hear that. But this is kind of an illusion. And it's like you can think of an actor going out on stage. The actor remembers who they are. They don a character for a while and they play it out with their friends. And on stage, they might be enemies. And then when everything is done, they go and they hang out with their friends and they know that was just a character they were playing. And they said, that's really what it's like here on Earth. And so we will do that sometimes for these beings, and the roles will often reverse. One lifetime will play the perpetrator, the next one will play the victim, just so we have a kind of balanced experience. And as we have these darker experiences where there's the absence of light, we have contrast. We have the ability to know the light better because there's something to compare it to. So That's part of why we will choose these more challenging lifetimes. And again, the guides say that the soul knows before it comes that it's just kind of an illusion. It's just a character they're going to don, and then eventually they'll go through the death cycle and they will reconnect and remember everything and take all the knowledge and wisdom that they learned through the experience forward.
Okay, my question is this. So, for example, these people right now in a war, it's a war over there in Ukraine and Russia, and a lot of people die young in their 20s, 30s, in their prime. Before they incarnated, they knew they're going to go to war. This is what they decided to do in their lives, just to live 25 or 35 years, just to learn a little bit.
Yes, so it depends on a couple of things. So sometimes they may choose that because with the setup that they chose, they didn't need a full lifetime. They just came in for a short lesson under these set of circumstances, and they'll incarnate and choose something that's maybe a longer lifetime. But also sometimes when people die young, it's also about how they exit that is important because it impacts those around them, and they're being of service by exiting that way so that those around them can have a different experience. And the service to humanity in that way at the soul level, for us to perceive just how heinous war really is, that there are better ways of existing, that we need to listen and communicate. And we haven't gotten it when it's been at the smaller levels, at the personal level. And so we take it into a more global realm. And sometimes we need these big mirrors to be able to see what we're playing out in our personal lives at the smaller scale. So at a soul level, these beings are being of service to humanity. And then for those that are left behind, as I said, sometimes that can impact them and change their life trajectory. They may develop a different point of focus that they wouldn't have had any other way, sadly.
Yeah, but why they don't understand this? Well, they knew it on the other side when they made that contract, but why they get here so much grief? They will suffer because the loved one left. They don't understand that there was a contract. They don't remember that.
Well, like I said, sometimes, for instance, if someone has a child that dies, you know, they may then change their life trajectory. They may then go off to be of service to learn about a disease and finding a cure for that disease, or something that they may not have done otherwise. So sometimes when tragedy happens, it wakes us up in a way that we may not have otherwise. But yes, at the soul level, we know that, we remember that. And the guides say pain is perception. We can stay there for 30 seconds or 30 years. Because we are operating so deeply under the illusion of separation, we don't remember that those beings are always with us. We always have that connection. It's different the way that we experience them on the other side. They're not, we can't go and have a coffee together, but or not in the same way, I suppose, but that connection is there. And so the level of grief is not quite so intense, but it also gives us a deeper appreciation of life itself. When it's not eternal, when it's finite, we have a different appreciation for life that we might not have. And this is part of why this dimension is so special, because we have these limitations, or the illusion of limitations, and that allows us to have a different emotional connection to things, a different reaction. If you can see potential timelines and you know exactly what's coming, you're not going to respond in the same way as you not being able to see the next moment, which is part of why 3D is so fun for a soul to come and play in, because you don't perceive that unless you are really consciously striving to open up and perceive records in that way.
In one of your teachings, you say that in approximately 5 years, humanity is going to progress in this ascension journey. So we may see some encounters with different beings.
So the guides talk about this period that we're in from 2019 to 2026 as being what is referred to in the future as frequency wars. So there is a war going on for control of the frequencies that we hold. So our thoughts, our emotions, and our physical bodies. And they say as we get to the end of this period, we start to see things and perceive things in a different way. That also means that it is quite likely that we will have contact in a very direct way, that it's not going to be just a few people saying, yes, I've seen a ship, or I have contact. It will be in a global way, because these beings have been waiting to connect with us, but the higher vibrational beings don't want to interfere with our growth process. So we have to elevate our consciousness to a certain level, because otherwise it just generates way too much fear, and that's counterproductive. But they're waiting for us to open up, and that we are ready at the collective level before they start showing up to interact with us again. And that's the next stage of our development, is remembering that we're part of a galactic community. Because when disclosure happens, it has a radical effect on a society, because then you start asking bigger questions like, how did you get here? What energy source are you working with? And when you've got free energy, that changes the socio-economic structure of a planet, or at least this one, because our financial systems, our social systems are all based on energy.
So how do you personally feel this shift in your own environment or around the globe, or talking, or communicating with the guides? How do you
I
feel?
think it's easier than it's ever been. I think information is more readily accessible in terms of being able to tune in and access the higher realms. I also notice the acceleration of time, which is something that the guides used to talk about. 25 years ago, they would say, well, your 12-hour day is going to feel like it's about, 8 hours long. And I was like, well, what does that mean exactly? And then recently, somebody asked about that, and they said, well, you tell us, how does it feel? Because you're experiencing that compression of time. And really what they were talking about is that the amount of data that we took in a 24-hour period, we're now taking in a much shorter amount of time. And I think this year they said was maybe about 6 hours, and next year will feel like about 4 hours. There's just way more data that we're taking in. And so it feels like we kind of get up, the day is really short, and then it's time to go to bed and start all over. So that I really see, that I feel, I think everybody feels that.
Do we need this extra data, or is just an extra for us? Do we really need it? Maybe we should come back to the old style of lifestyle, when you wake up and you do your little things around the house and you feel peaceful. Do we need all this extra information actually, or no?
I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. So I think in some ways, yes, we do need it, because it allows us to see patterns in an easier way than before, when things happened. That if you think about a waveform, when it repeats, it would take a very long time to see that waveform repeat. And now we're seeing things in a much faster way. So that allows for us to recognize things that are in front of us that need to be shifted. I think if you just look within the last 5 years around the globe, things with the government, with our institutions, we can see that there are major problems that need to be addressed, where those things were still happening 20 years ago, but we couldn't see some of those corrupt patterns in the way that we can definitely see them today. So there is an aspect of that I think is really important. But in terms of connection and being able to connect with the earth, getting out in nature, connecting in a very visceral human to human way, not just always on the computer, that's really important. So that's something that we need to make sure that we hold on to, that we're incorporating into our day.
Okay, you mentioned Mandela Effect. That's a very interesting subject. I'm going to mention something else. You remember the Monopoly?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks that he had a monocle, but he doesn't have a monocle. But
My reality, he did.
but everybody thinks that he does have it, And even now I see it with a monocle. But if you look at the actual game, he doesn't have one. That's a Mandela effect too, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that was another version of reality where, things were slightly different. And we can start to perceive those things, and it helps us to understand multidimensional reality. When so many of us are having that experience, it would be easy to write it off as, oh, my memory is failing. But when it's happening at the collective level, we can start to see that.
Okay, about Mandela Effect. Well, most people heard about it, but some of them didn't hear. Can you talk a little bit about Mandela Effect? We know that Nelson Mandela, he went to prison. Some people say that he got out of prison and he died later. Some think that he died in prison. What actually happened?
Well, it depends on what endowment you're standing on. So like I was saying, and you string these now moments together. So it is possible for you to go from one where that was the reality of things, where he died in prison, all right, and then go to a version where he died later, all right, outside of prison, and then move back to another version where the base frequency is once again where the past, the collective story is different. It's not a straight line that we experience reality in. So it's not that you're going to be on this version forever. You may go to something that's maybe a third option, that he never existed, or he never followed the path that he did. All those potentials are there on the infinite sphere. So it's just a matter of us choosing at the soul level the one that serves our growth, the one that allows us to be of the greatest service, and through that service also have the greatest soul growth.
I heard from some of my guests that we live in different realities. We have different lives, parallel lives. We live several lives at the same time.
Yes.
Do you know something? Can we talk about that a little bit?
Because time's an illusion here. The guides describe it as a marker for frequency, so we know where to find it. So part of the construct of 3D is time. Because if we came down into density and everything was immediately manifest and we were holding lower thoughts, we'd constantly be going through the death cycle. So we needed some sort of construct that allowed us the opportunity to shift our resonance so we were no longer in alignment with those things that we were thinking or feeling. So that those lower frequencies, it took a little more time for those to manifest, and we would no longer be in alignment with that. So in 5D and up, everything is happening all at once. So past, present, and future are one. So all of the lifetimes that we have are going on right now. So we are currently having a lifetime 3,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, in the past, and then also in the future. So it's all happening concurrently. And the thing that will kind of play with people's minds is that as you go through your own healing process, and maybe you remember a past life in Egypt or Atlantis, and you are working on healing and integrating that, as you work on those same frequencies here and now, maybe you're working on persecution, and in another lifetime you were persecuted. As you learn how to let go of that fear and that judgment around it and work on your own sense of safety and security, that knowledge and wisdom that is amassed through your own process of integration is holographically, fractally shared with that version of you in that past or future lifetime. So that energy is now available in their own energetic field, and they can then choose to access those records or not, just the way that you can. So you can help to heal a past life from this now moment by working and healing yourself.
Okay,
it's a lot to wrap the brain around.
Yeah, no, I didn't understand anything, but it's okay. Now, now, but I still am going to ask another question. So, do we need to get in touch with our another, lives? Do we need that actually? How can we feel that? How can we get in touch with ourselves in another dimension? Do you understand what I mean?
We don't have to.
Okay.
But I think a lot of people will have memories. They'll have things that they're really drawn to. Maybe they're really drawn to things that happened in World War I. or things that happen in different periods of time. And that can be because they've had a past life there. And there's knowledge and information for them to access. And you can. So whether you want to channel, you want to access your own records, you want to connect with source energy, the process is the same. And it's about going into the heart-centered space. And the easiest way to do that is to simply think of something that makes you smile.
Yeah.
And once you're in that multidimensional space, you can ask a question, set an intention of what it is that you want to know, and then open up to see what comes to you. And a lot of times it's going to be really subtle. It's not like there's going to be this big booming voice that gives you the answer. I think a lot of times that's what we expect it to be, but it's way more subtle than that. You might have an awareness, a sense of something. And then what'll happen is we'll go back to the ego mind and try to pull it apart. And then we've moved out of that space where we have access to that information. But you can ask for confirmation at that point. You can say, guys, look, I need some help. I think this is what happened. I'm looking for confirmation. And you might find that you overhear a conversation with the information that you just received, like somebody talking about something that happened in that time period. Maybe you read it in a book. Maybe there's a video that you come across, and maybe it's repeated numbers, patterns. It's different for everybody every time. And, if you wonder, well, hey, is this my sign? Then take it as such, because otherwise the thought wouldn't cross your mind.
It's interesting. For example, when you make a decision, sometimes something just flies in front of you, and you think about it, but then you said, oh, let me try it different. And then you come back to the first thought, and that was the right one. But the important is to catch that one and believe in it. That's the intuition.
And that comes through repetition. So when we learn to follow that and we give it a go and we see it works out, then it makes it easier the next time it happens. And you say, well, the last time I tried that, it worked out for me. So I'm going to go with that again. And you'll start to recognize that subtle energy when it shows up. It does feel different than your imagination. Your imagination actually feels really flat in comparison because you're accessing multidimensional levels of information. So, you might see an image and it's a nice day, but there's all this other data that's in there. It's 70 degrees, the birds are chirping, there's a light breeze. There's more data there, and your imagination can feel really flat when you compare it. But that only comes when you start to pay attention and recognize, well, what does it feel like in my body normally? How am I feeling on a regular basis when I connect with me? And then when these experiences happen, what do those feel like? And so this is why the guides say everybody needs some sort of practice for themselves. Times where they're checking in and learning how to work with their own energy field.
Now you said that you have to feel good, and then that's the right decision. But it's not physically, it's inside. You have to feel spiritually good.
Well, you have an awareness of it. Sometimes it doesn't always feel good. We might be able to perceive something that may be the truth of the situation, and we don't always want to experience anything that feels uncomfortable. It might be asking us to grow and shift in ways that are outside of our comfort zone. So it's not so much about the information itself feeling good, but you have to put yourself in your heart center, which that you do have to think of something that makes you smile and expansive. And then as you open up, then you can receive the information. And, at that point, it can be all different kinds of things.
Yeah, so we talked about that a little bit, but let's touch again because it's important. So how do we align ourselves to the truth? I mean, to what we need? How do we make it align? Yeah, go ahead.
Again, the truth is subjective. So the guides say there are very few things that are absolute truths, and those are more universal laws. Most everything else is rather subjective. So it can be very difficult to discern what is the absolute truth. We want to know, did X, Y, and Z happen? And again, it goes back to, we were talking about the Mandela Effect. Well, which now moment are you standing on? What are you bringing forward? Did it happen? Did it not happen? My memories of the past may be different than the ones that you have. So it can be very difficult in terms of learning for an absolute truth of the past. So all of your power lies in the now moment. So you have to decide how you want to feel, how you want to show up in this now moment. That's really all there is. And what happens in the past is gone. You can't put your energy into it. If you're trying to, it's just wasted energy. The future, you're not experiencing it yet. So if you're trying to project to a future, and we do this a lot of times because we want to manipulate reality. We want to make sure we avoid pain. So we're trying to control and manipulate to get to a specific frequency. That again is wasting energy because you're trying to project yourself to a now moment that you're not standing on. So you have to bring yourself back to the now and decide how you want to feel right here, right now, how you want to show up energetically. And when you do that, then that will change your version of the truth and what you see and perceive in the world. You might hold a belief that, all people are loving and kind and good-hearted when it comes down to it, and somebody else might think, people suck. They're just self-centered.
Yeah.
And depending on the energy that you hold, that's what you're going to perceive. You will encounter people who are kind and generous and show up that way for you. And the other person is going to find people who just behave poorly. And that's what they experience. So the truth of things really is the energy that you're holding and your beliefs about the world at a personal level.
Okay. You want to change the truth, you change inside you. How do you perceive? You change your perception, and then the truth changes with your perception.
Yes.
Let me ask you then about if people want to find more about you, about your work, about your books, about your seminar, if you'd like to talk about that.
Yes, you can find more information over on our website at higherfrequencies.net. We've got a lot of different things going on over there. One of the things we haven't really talked about that the guides work with is the language of light and the symbols that represent the language, which are galactic light codes. They're a piece of spiritual technology, so we do a lot of work with that, and there's more information on the work we do there. And every month we have a group session, our Pleiadian Perspective events. So yeah, there's a lot to see over there.
Okay. What's the, community of Pleiadians on this earth? I mean, people who are in touch with Pleiadians and who are communicating with Pleiadians. Is it a big community?
I think a lot of people feel aligned with the Pleiadians. That can be because they've spent time in that star system, or they're contracted to connect with the Pleiadians. Also, the archetypal patterns of that system, we might feel drawn to those archetypal patterns. A lot of Pleiadian energy is about record keeping, teaching, some healing. So people may feel drawn to a particular star system, and then they think, oh, well, I must be from the Pleiades. But the guides always try to reorient everybody to say, I'm part of source energy. And then I may have spent time in Sirius, Arcturus, Orion, and the Pleiades. So, they might start out and feel like they're aligned with the Pleiades, but then as they go through life and they're shifting and working on different things, all of a sudden they may feel really drawn to Sirius or Arcturus. And that has to do with the archetypal patterns that they're working to integrate, because there are 7 major star systems with which Earth most closely aligns. And that's Sirius, Orion, Andromeda, Cassiopeia, Arcturus, Lyra, and the Pleiades. I think I missed one, but we pull these archetypal patterns, things that those systems have worked on, whether it's control and manipulation or communication, acceptance, creativity, beauty. There are all different kinds of patterns that we have. So at different times we may feel drawn to different systems. So I think right now there are quite a few people who are drawn to the Pleiades just because they're record keepers. They're wanting to bring out messages about the past. They're teaching, they're healing.
Yeah. So we used to live on these different dimensions, and we brought some experience here, which we don't remember exactly, but we feel it, that we... Yes. So we'll never die.
No, we're eternal. We're infinite beings of light.
Do we keep our personality? Do we remember everything that happened on this earth, for example, in this lifetime?
Well, they say we can, yes, when we have an experience with it, which is fifth dimensional and up, at any given moment, we can express ourselves as all that is, or we can express ourselves as kind of an individuated consciousness, a personality, if you will. And we can access all of those other aspects of ourselves because, again, as we can connect and be one with all that is, we are all those lifetimes that we've had.
Okay, so we have a lot of spirit guides and around us. And people don't feel the guides.
No, and a lot of that's just because they're up in the ego mind. So when you can go back into that heart-centered space and you can make that connection and you open up, you start to shine more of your light. And as you start to shine more of your light, you will call in people who are of a matching frequency.
Yeah.
They can't see you when you've got your light hidden.
Yeah.
And it's hard to make those connections. So it's really about shifting operating systems. And once you do that, then you can feel that sense of connection because your connection to all that is, that heart-centered connection, is really the basis for all of your other relationships. So the most important relationship is the one that you have with Source.
Yeah.
And as if you're not opening up to the full force of Source energy, then your physical relationships are going to represent that as well.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. You say that they can't see your light. It's like I don't know, it's a universe, but if you're not shining, they cannot see you, so they cannot help you. So you have to start that fire inside yourself by yourself, so you can be seen.
Yeah, you actually are this amazing, brilliant light, and then you cover it up with all these illusions of lack and separation. So think about a house that has a bright light inside, and you're standing outside at night, and all the limiting beliefs you have, it's like dirt on the window. So as the light's trying to pass through the dirty windows, it's not very bright on the outside. And the way that we perceive ourselves is through the external reflection. So you really are this amazing, pristine, brilliant, infinite being with all of this light. It's just the limitations, the limiting beliefs that you hold. And when you start to drop those, to see yourself as an aspect of the divine, then your bright light shines out. It's like cleaning off those windows, all those filters.
Thank you for watching About Freedom Show. I really appreciate you. Click on one of the videos below and don't forget to subscribe.